Welcome to the Expansive Astrology Podcast, where we look at using astrology beyond the tropes and horoscopes to tune into the natural forces around us and within us, honoring our true nature to craft our future. I'm your host, Melissa, the Self-Care Witch, and I'm here to help you meet your magic. Without further ado, let's begin this week's episode with a tarot reading for the collective. Hello, love. Thank you for tuning in to episode 2 of the Expansive Astrology Podcast. I'm excited to be here for you. We're going to start with the collective tarot reading. Same as last week. I'm pulling 4 cards, one for what is present, one for what is underneath that, supporting that, one for what the lesson is, and one for what to anchor into, what to pay attention to. So let's see what comes up for this week. Just to name a few things before we even dive in there, this is a tarot reading intended for the collective, for everybody. So there will be some things that really resonate and some things that maybe don't. Take what you need and leave the rest. To name my lineage, I mostly use Soul Tarot Theory by Lindsay Mack. And if you understand any of these cards to be something else or something more or something different than what I'm presenting, maybe you're meant to tap in with that knowing more so than with like my words. So as always, like rely on your own knowing first. So let's see. Let's see what we have today. Lots of swords. All right. Okay, so let's just dive into it. So what showed up for what is present for us this week? We have the Star. And I glanced, as I was shuffling, I glanced at the Tower, which comes right before the Star. The Star. So the Star, coming right after the Tower, where the Tower is a major shift or change. And it's not always, sometimes it's a big event. Sometimes it's really subtle. The tarot can act in both. The tarot both reflects like the big things that happen in life and things that are sometimes so subtle and small that we might not even really notice them if they weren't reflected to us by the cards. So we've made it through some sort of Tower experience where there's been some sort of change or shift. Sometimes it's really traumatic and like full of grieving, and sometimes we really fight it. It's often not something we would choose for ourselves. And whether or not you feel like you have just completed some sort of Tower experience, I only name what the Tower is to help us illustrate how the Star comes in and provides such nurturing, caretaking, major caretaking. And I mentioned the Tower because of the divine timing of it all. The Star comes in and helps us rebuild from that Tower moment. It helps us to tend to our bodies, our nervous systems, ourselves, to tend to ourselves, to tend to our foundation. Lindsay Mack calls the Star the nervous system healer of the tarot. So again, whether or not you feel like you've been through some sort of Tower experience, some sort of major change, whether that part resonates with you or not, what is present here this week is a major invitation to tend to ourselves, to caretake ourselves. I believe the Star is ruled by Aquarius, and Aquarius is all about serving the collective, right? Aquarius is the water bearer, an air sign who bears water, who brings water, and water being a life-sustaining energy. The star asks us, how can we caretake ourselves? How can we water ourselves? How can we partake of the hydrating water in a way that also gives back to the collective, knowing that this came up last week with the Ace of Pentacles, where the idea of like we have to start with what's in front of us, we have to start with ourselves, we have to start with what's in our hand in order to expand past that and give back to like the collective in a really um, uh, helpful way. In order to give back to the collective, we have to start with ourselves. So the star invites us into radical healing, nurturing, tending of the nervous system, tending of ourselves, tending of our brains and our bodies, so that then we can show up for the collective. That's what's present for us. A big invitation to surrender to the need, surrender to the to what it is to tend to our nervous systems, to surrender to what it is to heal. And it's icky. It's icky to heal sometimes. I think of like, a scab. I think of the healing process of um, a gross, gnarly scab. It gets nice and disgusting and itchy and real gross before it gets better, Um, and that's healing work. It's work, emphasis on the work word. Um, and supporting us in that this week is Four of Swords. And what's so amazing is that the Four of Swords was our lesson last week. I think that's really wonderful. Supporting our healing work, our incredible, radical permission to caretake ourselves and tend to ourselves, tend to our nervous system, knowing that ultimate caretaking of ourselves is the only way that we can then like give to the collective. Supporting that is that Four of Swords work where, any sword card, which this week's poll is full of swords. We know we're really talking about our brain, the stories our brain tells, our brain chemistry, the things that, we don't get to choose how our brain operates. We don't get to choose our brain chemistry. We don't get to choose the invitations our brain brings us into, unfortunately. And we do get to choose what we do with those invitations. We get to choose how we respond to those things. And the Four of Swords is an ally, a beautiful reminder that we can be with our brain chemistry. We can be really in it and not make any moves off of that. We don't have to buy into everything our brain tells us. We don't have to take every invitation our brain brings us into. We don't have to do it. The only way out is through, and we know that sometimes we just have to write it out. Sometimes we just have to be with what is present. We just have to be with what our brain is saying. And again, emphasis on the idea that we don't have to take the invitations of the brain. So something I've been really doing recently is just straight up saying to my brain, like, I'm not available for that right now. Just saying to myself, there was one time in specific in the past week or so where, launching this podcast and doing this creative soul-led work that I'm doing, my brain gets really activated. My ego gets really activated. And I was just in a whole lot of self-doubt and criticism and worry and fear about my work. And it was keeping me from sleeping. And finally, I was like, I didn't know that this would work as well as it did, but I caught myself just fixating and spiraling, and I stopped myself and I was like, I'm not available for this kind of shit right now. Like, I'm not going to listen to it anymore. I don't need to hear all of this doubt and this fear. I need to rest. I'm not available for all of this doubt and this fear right now. And my brain listened. It worked in a way. The fear's still there, and I revisited it later, but for that moment, I was able to rest. But the key there is that I had to have a relationship with my brain. I had to have mindfulness and awareness around what was coming up for me, why, and do I have to believe it? I knew that I didn't have to buy into it. I didn't have to believe it, but I had to get quiet. I had to accept the fact that my brain was going haywire, and I had to be with that before I could like figure out how to kind of unstick myself from it. So that's kind of it's Four of Swords work. It's our willingness to be in our brain, to be with what is happening, swords to the face, and knowing that the only way out of that is through, knowing that we have to just kind of be with it. We have to sit with it. We can't resist it. We can't fight it. We have to shine a light on it. And I can't emphasize this enough. We do not have to take every invitation our brain says. So, for me, when we're talking about like very egoic, like fear that was coming up for me around my work that I'm doing, the invitations were, stop. You don't have to do this. Stop doing this. It's not going to work. You can't, any sort of like doubt driven idea of how I should be or what I should do. Um, I, I, I get to choose whether or not I believe those things. I get to choose whether or not I take those invitations. And um, I think learning how to kind of, okay, so you're going to hear the Aquarius in me come out. If you didn't know, I'm an Aquarius sun. This might give it away. This idea of like detachment. And I know that kind of comes naturally to air signs, is the ability to like detach from our brain a little bit, detach from our beliefs. But I think that's swords work in general, but also in Four of Swords, our willingness to be in it without overly identifying with it, you know. So, so what is present for us this week is a big invitation to tend to our nervous system, to prioritize our own healing, knowing that the cards are telling us that in order to do that, the foundation of that healing work will come from an ability to be with our mind, to be with the brain, swords to the face, without necessarily overly identifying with what those swords are bringing us, without necessarily making any moves off of what is coming up for us. Taking a beat, taking a pause, focusing on that healing before we make any moves. Now, the lesson for the week is Page of Swords. Told you tons of swords this week, and we're not done yet. But the Page of Swords is the lesson. I really love the Page of Swords is also ruled by Aquarius. So we have a lot of like Fool energy in this pole. We have a lot of air energy in this pole. The Page of Swords represents our willingness to show up, our willingness to, use our checking in and being willing to bring forward what is meant to come forward in us, a willingness to share. And at this point, the lesson, right? The sword might feel a little heavy for us at this point, and we are fully equipped to begin. So, more invitations that we don't have to buy into the brain's stories that we need to stay small or quiet in some way. The lesson of the week is allowing a willingness to show up, and serve, to show up and speak. Checking in and making sure that um, even though we know we're still a student and maybe we have a ways to grow And we have a message right now. You have something to share right now, and you are fully equipped to share that thing right now. You can both be a student and be fully equipped to show up and share, right? So in the Page of Swords, more invitations to step into our authentic truth and share that, permissioning ourselves to share that, working with and working through any brain contraction or brain stories that we shouldn't, for whatever reason, share that. And then I'd ask for you to, for yourself, kind of define what it is as I'm saying that, share that, be willing to be that, embody that, step into that, what is that for you? What is it that you are being called to step forward and bring into the world? And tying that back to, the Star and the Four of Swords. So what's present for us, just kind of taking it back before we keep going forward. What's present for us is a big invitation to tend to ourselves and heal for the good of the collective. Supporting that. We know that one of the most effective ways to do that is to develop a relationship with our brain where we don't have to take every invitation. We can be with the brain. We can be really in the brain and not let that necessarily dictate how we move through the world. And then a lesson of permissioning ourselves to show up right now as we are with what we have. In the midst of all of that healing work that we're being invited to trudge through, showing up with confidence and an authentic like rawness and a willingness to be imperfect and to share what you are, share what you know, say what you need to say, and trusting that what you are being called to be and do and share is divine. And then anchoring all of that, what we are being invited by the tarot to pay attention to this week. What do we do with all of that, right? What do we anchor into? What do we need to pay attention to is Knight of Swords. Swords, swords, swords. And the Knight of Swords asks us, any knight asks us, like, how are you moving through the world? And then the swords invite us to consider, how are we moving through the world in terms of how we share, how we communicate, how we think. The Knight of Swords. This knight is moving. This knight is going faster than the horse is comfortable with, but they are led by their sword. It's divine. It's safe. How far are you willing to go? Are you willing to go farther than is comfortable? Are you willing to be so in the flow that you're just soaring? I love how that idea, this willingness to soar, a willingness to go with the flow, a willingness to go farther and faster than might feel comfortable for us. I love how that ties in with the other three cards of the week, right? The lesson being Page of Swords. Like, hey, you have a message. You have a big old sword that you know how to handle. It might feel a little heavy, but and you might like have some work to do with how to move and use that sword in the most graceful, effective way possible. And you get to use that sword today. And then anchoring into, how are you going to do that? What does that look like practically? Like as you move throughout the world, are you willing to trust so fully and deeply in your message, in your authenticity, in your healing journey? Are you able and willing to trust so deeply in that you can hop on that Knight of Swords horse and go and flow sword first? What are you being called to bring into the world. And how can you do that a little more fully, a little more authentically, a little more messily? Are you willing to be a little messy? Knowing that we're all pretty messy and that we're healing through the mess, we're healing through things, knowing that healing in itself is very messy. How far are you willing to go? And in the sword suit, we're developing a sacred relationship with the brain. We're learning the brain's tricks with all due respect. We're learning whether or not we need to be in brain or be in heart, be in brain or be in soul, whether or not we need to listen to everything the brain says. And when we're doing that work, the brain likes to bring us into contraction, so really be aware of that. When we're stepping into Page of Swords or Knight of Swords or any really court card in the swords where we're being invited to embody leadership in some way, that especially the brain will be like, no, 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 no. It's time to be small. We need to be small and quiet. And the brain will do really masterful, tricky things to try to convince you of that, right? Imposter syndrome, just criticism, self-doubt, distractibility, any sort of doubt. The brain is really good at keeping us from anything that feels like a risk to it, right? So you get to ask yourself, like, what is the benefit of me staying small right now? And if the benefit is very much like your brain's comfort, your ego's comfort, or if it's somehow rooted in like misogyny, capitalism, or the patriarchy, that's a cue to you to maybe shake it out a little bit. See if you can recenter with the heart. See if you can choose not to take the brain's invitations and move forward anyway. I want to reemphasize the importance of the star here this week, too, that this is all revolving around a very present calling, a very present invitation for us to heal ourselves, move slowly through the world, or maybe not slowly, but gently, carefully. Doesn't necessarily have to be slow, but it does need to be careful. So I think that's it for the tarot reading this week. I hope that's useful for you or inspiring in some way. Please let me know if it was. Okay, so now moving into the expansive astrology discussion for the week, we're talking about permission, baby. Permission and pleasure. Let's get into it. So, the invitations of Taurus come in two flavors: the stabilizing and cultivating safety, and then there's the luxuriating and the cultivating pleasure. Right? And this week, we're talking about pleasure. So, we're talking like orgasmic manifestation vibes. We're talking Venus vibes, Empress vibes, empowering ourselves, permissioning ourselves, positioning ourselves into a place of radical receptivity, which is truly like foundational. Like, I really invite you to lean into this. It's so foundational before we move into Gemini season, where we're really, it's an air sign, so we get really heady and evaluative, and we start evaluating and exploring and really feeling into what it is to be a magician, a channel, a body, right? So we're building this foundation of pleasurable radical receptivity. And then we'll expand upon that in a really beautiful way next month. And there's a million reasons why this is important. And the brain and our culture love to convince us to put these things on the back burner, or we convince ourselves that this idea of cultivating pleasure is something that we have to earn or it needs to come later. We um, um, and like acknowledging what resources we do and do not have, right? But the invitation is to utilize your privilege if you have it and build with what you do have, finding pleasure where you are, where you can. Don't let the brain bypass this important work, saying that it's too fruity, too fluffy, that you somehow don't deserve it or can't engage with cultivating pleasure for whatever reason. There's a million reasons that this can be it's one of the hardest things to do. It's one of the hardest things to do. And there are a million different reasons that we can come up with to not prioritize these things. And I wonder what it would be like if all of us did prioritize these things. Oh my God, what a wonderful world. If we all were focused on keeping our eyes on our own paper and cultivating pleasure where we stand with what we have. And if we all focused on that and felt that, like how I know when I'm in a good place in those ways, I show up for my clients and I show up for the barista taking my order. I show up for my baby. I show up for the strangers who are passing by me on the highway, in a different way, right? So what if we all did that? And when we don't do that, when we don't allow ourselves to receive, you may have heard me say this before. I'll say it every fucking day. I'll say it every fucking day. When we don't allow ourselves to receive, we are forced into scarcity. We get forced into a place of taking, because we need these things one way or another. We need to feel cared for. We need to feel safe and secure. We need to feel emotionally safe. We need to feel seen and allow ourselves to get vulnerable at least some of the time with some people, right? We need to take care of our bodies, our human bodies that we all have a responsibility of caring for and maintaining. Like we all have to do this. And if we don't allow ourselves to receive these things, then we're forced to do it from a place of scarcity. We're forced to scrounge. We're forced to grasp and grab, and we get panicked. We're forced into a place of like panic buying almost, panic taking, and that's just it doesn't. If we can open ourselves up to receiving, maybe our needs can be met in a way that's not so panicked, right? When we don't receive, when we're not allowing ourselves, opening ourselves up to this radical receptivity, when we don't prioritize cultivating pleasure just as much as we prioritize, hustling and grinding, paying rent, and elevating our social status, all the other things that we engage with. If we don't prioritize cultivating pleasure and beauty and abundance and goodness, those things have nowhere to go. They're here. It's here. It's all around us for the taking, right? Beauty, abundance, goodness. There are people all over the world who will be willing to hear your story or support you. Who will cherish you. Like there's beauty and goodness and abundance for all. There's enough for all of us. And you get to receive that, my love. You get to receive that, my love. And if you don't, if you are so blocked off from that you don't, then then your share has nowhere to go. Take a seat at the table, babe. I have a recent story. I'm going to share a personal story. It's a little vulnerable from like in the last week of how my own stubbornness got in the way of my receiving. And it's especially like, I hate, I kind of hate to share this story because I like didn't take my own advice. This is one of the things that I've been telling clients for years is if you want tacos, say you want tacos, babe. That's a way of cultivating pleasure, by the way. And I always encourage my clients, like, because I work with a lot of people who are like passive or people pleasers or who struggle to find their voice. And I always invite people that even if you're like in a group and everybody, it's the classic, like, what do we want for dinner? I don't know. What do you want? Oh man, I don't know. What do you want? I'm up for anything. And nobody's really saying anything. Or even if they are saying something, even if you're in a group and they're getting ready to order pizza, I challenge my clients to say, if they want tacos, say it. Just say it. Even if you know everybody else wants pizza, um, almost as like an act of rebellion to that side of you that wants to be quiet and is afraid to say you want tacos. Say you want tacos. Don't be crazy about it. If everybody else wants pizza, and you're willing to eat pizza, get pizza, or, prioritize yourself so much, prioritize your own pleasure so much that you go get your own tacos and you'll meet them back. You'll meet them back there. Anyway, I have this whole thing about using your voice and advocating for taco night if you want a taco night. It's so important because it's not about the tacos, right? It's about using your voice. And when we allow ourselves, when we challenge ourselves, sometimes it's really hard for some of us to say, I want tacos tonight. It can be really hard for a million reasons. But when we allow ourselves to do that for the quote unquote smaller things, it strengthens our ability to do it for the bigger things. So I have this thing about tacos, and the other night, tacos sounded really nice. And I don't even remember exactly what was going on between my husband and I, but we were both being stubborn and frustrating. And we were both frustrated with the other person, and we were both being frustrating. And both of us were really, standing in such stubbornness. And both of us are fixed signs, and Taurus is a fixed sign as well. So um, it's an example of how like that stubbornness and being self-assured are like they kind of they're similar. They can feel really similar. Those things to the ego kind of feel the same or similar, and baby, they're not. They're not. And if I had just said I would like tacos, let's go to this taco joint that I've been thinking about since 3 o'clock. If I had just said the damn thing, like it's a huge conflict would have been avoided, and uh, sometimes it's really hard to say, I would like tacos, especially when, especially when things are feeling, tense in some way, right? There was tension already. I was being a little stubborn. I was feeling frustrated and being kind of an ass. And so was my husband, you know. We all have those days, right? Tell me that you have those days. Reassure me, please, because now I'm embarrassed. I'm telling this story on my podcast, and I know it's brand new and not a lot of people are listening, but I'm suddenly feeling very self-conscious. Just kidding. Anyway, it's just I as I was like, um, as all that happened, and as my husband and I repaired afterward, and we kind of were able to identify where we were being asses. I was like, man, this is so Taurus. This is so like what I'm talking about on the podcast this week is receiving pleasure, and Taurus can be so fixed and stubborn, and it can get in our way of receiving pleasure. So how can you, so here's the invitation. Like, how can you make sure that you're protecting your ego? Because in my experience, I can't speak for all of us, but in my experience, when I'm being frustrating like that, when I'm being an ass, when I'm not using my voice, when I'm um just like engaging in a conflict that doesn't truly feel important to me on like a values level, you know what I'm saying? When I'm doing that, it's all ego and it's all protection. I'm trying to protect myself in some way. I'm trying to protect my ego. How can you protect yourself, protect your ego, and also get your needs met, and also not be an asshole to your husband who just wants to know what you want to eat for dinner? You know? And I know I spoke about this last week, but like we're taking it a step further this week. This idea of romanticizing your life. Romanticize the fuck out of your life. Again, permission yourself to do it, because the beauty is all around us. Not to sound super cheesy, but my love, it is. It's all around us. And when we don't engage with it in a really, um, you know, intentional, mindful, um, grateful way, then it's just like, it's just, it's just there for no reason. We have to show appreciation for those things. And if for no other reason, for the reason that what we appreciate appreciates. Okay, so once you start romanticizing your life, once you start really romanticizing the fuck out of your life in like a really um really radical way, once you start doing that, like it becomes easier and easier, because like the goodness just flows and you'll find it all around. It gets easier and easier. um and mindfulness is like the foundation of all of this. Allowing ourselves, I know I said this last week, but it's important enough to repeat. Allowing ourselves to really be with every um, nurturing sip of water, really be with the orange and our hands as we're peeling the orange, really being mindful in our conversations, and being mindful when we're being stubborn, being mindful when we know we want tacos, but we're not, for whatever reason, just allowing ourselves to say, I would like tacos tonight. How does that sound? Mindfulness. It's the foundation of everything. And there are so many things that distract us from the pleasure and the goodness, that distract us from living a soulful life. And mindfulness is the like the hack to rewire that, to get us out of that distraction, so that we can be with the pleasure, be with the goodness, and be in a soulful life. So, how do we practice receiving? This is your work for this week. This is your challenge this week, your invitation, your experiment, whatever works for you. This is what I want you to focus on this week. How do you receive? How do you receive a delicious meal? How do you receive a hug, an orgasm, a compliment, the sunshine, a 15-minute break? How do you receive bad news, or your paycheck, or your vitamins? How do you receive? Have you heard the idea that how we do one thing is how we do everything? Ugh. When I really think about it, I don't like that one so much. And let's just practice. Let's just practice. What is around you right now that you can practice receiving with? Now, let's talk about the difference between control and power, because it's a nuanced difference, but the shift is powerful, and it can better position us in a place of receptivity. So control is where we're trying to determine the behavior or supervise the running of, maintain influence or authority over, limit the level, intensity, or numbers of a thing. Whereas power is the capacity or ability to direct or influence the behavior of others or the course of events. It's nuanced, and I just invite you to feel into that for yourself. How does that feel for you? The difference between those things. And I'm going to read them again. Control is being able to determine the behavior or supervise the running of, maintain influence or authority over, limit the level, intensity, or numbers of a thing. And power is the capacity or ability to direct or influence the behavior of others or the course of events. To me, control is I have to really grasp for control. When I find myself trying to seek control or feeling out of control, it's very panicked, it's very hyper vigilant, it's very egoic, it's very scared. And like for me, that just doesn't exist. Like even the phrase, like when I'm trying to grasp for my power, even that phrase doesn't work because I don't feel like I have to grasp for power. And I've been doing this work long enough that I know when I'm in my power and when I'm out of my power. And certainly sometimes it takes, some time or some work or some like a nice breather for me to shift from a disempowered place back into an empowered place. But um, there's no grasping, there's no panic there. It's a shift rather than a reaching for. Now, that might not resonate with you, that difference between control and power. Either way, what I would invite you to ask yourself is like, what will it look like for you to embrace your power? Ask yourself, like, where are you neglecting your power? Where where do you need it the most? Where do you give it away? What does it look like when you have power over yourself in your world? What does it look like when you're empowered over your brain chemistry? Do you know? Have you ever had that experience? Um, you know, Brain chemistry is a bitch, man. It's one hell of a journey to like have a empowered relationship with our brain chemistry because we don't get to choose what happens in our brain. We don't get to choose how our brain shows up. So maybe the question isn't, do you have power over your brain chemistry, but what does it look like for you to have so much power over yourself that you aren't fighting with your brain chemistry quite so hard? How can you step into that place today? And again and again and again and again and again, moment by moment, interaction by interaction, feeling by feeling, person by person. Like, how can you step into your power again and again and again? What makes you feel empowered? What makes you feel empowered? What turns you the fuck on? What turns you on? What gets you going? What excites you? And what gets in the way of fostering that? Lots of things, right? Lots of things. But just note. And those things that get in the way of it, um, can you like hold them alongside instead? Can you prioritize what turns you on? This Taurus work is all about the nitty gritty here and now of hypervigilance and managing traumas, and then it's also about the more meta, like big picture shit, like your how you're spending your time, what you do for yourself, your sense of deservingness, your ability to parent yourself. Again, with that like recent taco example, it's an example of control versus power, resisting versus receiving, stubbornness versus self-assuredness. Taurus is here supporting you in cultivating this pleasure, in romanticizing your life, in chasing what turns you on, in prioritizing what turns you on. Nobody's going to give you permission like you're going to give you permission, but just in case you needed permission, here you go, babe. I also want to spend some time talking about Mercury retrograde this week because we're in it and we are about to be so heavily in Mercury energy that it feels important. It feels important to talk about. Um, so, Mercury rules all things dealing with communication. It's how we think, how we communicate, how we listen, how we connect. Mercury also rules the lungs and the hands. So, it reminds us to really stay connected to ourselves so that we can bring our magic outward into the world. So, from the tone of our voice to our body language to how we are engaging with our hands, Mercury has an influence on all of it. Mercury's influence is broad, it's vast. And Mercury retrograde is one astrological event that garners a lot of attention, right? Whether or not you study astrology, anyone with an internet connection is aware of when Mercury is in Gatorade again. Um, and generally speaking, Mercury retrograde gets a really bad rap. It's known for its mishaps. It's known for car troubles and computer crashes and misunderstandings and arguments and unwelcomed guests. And sure, those things totally happen, but why? Right? Why do those things occur? And Mercury retrograde is about much more than that. It's about more than the mishap. Communication is difficult. It's hard. Half of the work I do as a coach is helping people learn how to communicate. And we all fall on a spectrum from like passive to aggressive. And we can shift places on that spectrum day to day, or maybe person to person, interaction to interaction, or even within a single interaction, we can shift from aggressive to passive. And the middle ground there is assertiveness. And I think we're all learning how to be as effective and as assertive as we can for our whole stinking life. I don't think anyone has mastered it. We're always working on how to communicate our needs better, how to connect with others better. And then there's, cultural differences and cultural influences that influence the way that we connect, the way that we communicate. And then there's, individual influences. There's neurodivergency. There's a million ways that our communication is always evolving. We're always invited to improve and express ourselves better. The way that we communicate means everything in this human existence on Earth, and yet so often we feel lost about how to communicate our needs. And where Mercury lies in your chart will help to reveal how you think, how you talk, how you express yourself. And if you have really heavy Mercury placements, retrograde might impact you more notably than others. And maybe Mercury retrograde is really subtle for you. Either way, what does it mean when Mercury is in retrograde? Because really, it's it's all an optical illusion, truly. The other planets in our solar system all orbit the sun at varying speeds and degrees, right? The outer planets from Mars to Neptune and Pluto take longer to orbit the sun because their paths are longer. Mercury and Venus, on the other hand, lap the Earth, causing them to have an apparent backward motion some of the time. The planets aren't actually moving backward, it just appears that way. Mercury completes its orbit around the sun every 88 days, which means it appears to go retrograde like 3 or 4 times per year for about 3 weeks at a time. I always consider Mercury retrograde to be a great excuse to really revive and revitalize and revisit and replenish and restore different areas of my life. So during Mercury retrograde, so about 3 or 4 times per year for about 3 weeks at a time, I take it extra nice and easy during what is like notoriously a very chaotic time of the year, right? So any sort of traffic jams turn into mindfulness opportunities, and arguments turn into opportunities to grow closer, share myself more fully. Challenges become chances to center in and show up embodied and empowered. I use Mercury retrograde as an excuse, a reminder that we get to choose how we respond to any and every situation. So, Mercury retrograde really presents us, if we choose, it presents us an opportunity for heightened mindfulness around all things communication and expression. I take this time and I invite you to take this time to tend to your spaces, tend to your soul, tend to your relationships really intentionally and deliberately, deeply connecting with the vision that you hold of your most vibrant and aligned self. And then anything and everything that doesn't align with that vision needs to, with peace and love, get the fuck out. It needs to get out. So I also like about 3 or 4 times per year. It's when I do a closet clean out. Clean out the closets, clean out the pantry, get the car serviced, empty my email inbox, and do a little mini phone purge. I also use Mercury retrograde as an excuse to experiment with taking a break from a certain habit and adding in a certain habit both. So usually this looks like for the duration of the retrograde, I will like quit coffee and start yoga or something along those lines. Quit Twitter and start journaling is what I did this retrograde. So I will revisit themes from Mercury retrograde and themes from Mercury in the weeks moving forward because we're moving into Gemini season and Mercury retrograde is around for a few more weeks. So, before I go, I do want to share with you a little bit about what Gemini is all about and the invitations of Gemini, since it will be Gemini season the next time we meet here. So we are moving from a fixed earth sign into a mutable air sign, which always feels like quite the shift, in my opinion. Um, Gemini is energetic, it's very lively, it's intellectual, it's versatile, and it lives in the mind. Gemini is adaptable and clever. It's interested in self-expression, and it's known for being really charming and friendly and enthusiastic and fun, right? Gemini is really like interested in others, and that's a theme that we're going to be talking about for the next several weeks. Is othering. Othering is a word that will come up frequently. When are we othering ourselves? Gemini it has a gift of seeing itself in others. It wants to know others and be accepted by others, and it's interested in knowing and accepting and understanding everything. And that can be really beautiful, or it can be really kind of harmful and painful when we're othering ourselves. We can other ourselves into total isolation. And this is where the medicine of the Lover's card comes in. More on that in the coming weeks. So we're looking at communication and self-expression. Gemini rules the third house. So where Taurus can be really fixed and unmoving, in how it shows up, which means in how it expresses itself, how it communicates. Gemini can be really mutable or flaky. So just keeping that in mind. Keeping that in mind. During Gemini season, we're also really looking at our relationship with our body. Um, our because we're everything that we are, everything that we think, everything that we know, everything that we bring into the world is channeled through a body, right? We have like these ideas that come from where? I don't know. And our body on some level and to some degree has to interpret all of these experiences, all of these thoughts, runs through all these channels, and then we have like an output, right? So, so Gemini season, the Magician, Mercury invites us to really look at that, look at our body, look at our nervous system. Again, Mercury's influence is really vast. And when we're talking about our nervous system, it's like everything. It's like everything. Our nervous system is like everything that we are. I mean, obviously not really, but like I mean kind of. I'm being dramatic, um but it's true. Our nervous system is everything, dude. So like this past month and this week's invitations, remember, are to really heal ourselves, cultivate pleasure, prioritize pleasure. And then in Gemini season, we're looking at our body, the impact of our lives on our body, on our channel. And then we're also looking at the lovers, right? How are we mirrors of, how are we mirrors to those around us? How do we reflect what is inside of us? How does what is inside of us reflect what is outside of us? All sorts of like projection questions, mirrors questions, othering ourselves questions. It's a lot. The lover is a lot. So in Gemini season, we're exploring our relationship with our brain, with our nervous system, with our body, how we think and react to things, and how our relationship with our inner selves is reflected in our outer world. I can't wait. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Back to that foundational piece of prioritizing pleasure, cultivating pleasure. Maybe if I say it like 100 times, it'll like permeate your brain in a way that you will listen and like truly believe it um, when I say to cultivate pleasure, prioritize pleasure. You deserve it. It's right there for you. You get to live in such a way. This has suddenly turned into a hypnosis podcast. Um, okay, just kidding. Now, before I go, I do want to share a bit of an astrological forecast, just telling you what's coming up in the week ahead until we meet again. When you're hearing this, we will just be coming out of a full moon, total lunar eclipse in Scorpio. Hoo boy. And I will also, as you're hearing this, I will have just had my first moon meetup. I cannot wait for this. The next one will be May 29th in preparation for the upcoming new moon. This is meant to be an opportunity for people to have a very loving, gentle, therapeutic check-in on a regular basis. This is happening every other Sunday, 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I'm asking for an exchange of just $13, and money is not a barrier to access. So if you would like the link to join, just let me know. You are so welcome to join. My intention is for all of us to carve out some time to be in our body, to be with ourselves, to show some gratitude, to chat through anything that's feeling really sticky, to set empowered, effective intentions for the week ahead. I can help with that. I can do some tarot, individual tarot pulls for anybody who needs or wants it. Some mindfulness, embodiment exercises, and just really gentle, loving support. So I hope to see you at the next one. You're invited. Upcoming though, on Friday the 20th, we start Gemini season. The sun enters Gemini. And then Sunday the 22nd, we have the waning half moon in Pisces, and Mercury enters into Taurus. And then on Tuesday the 24th, Mars enters Aries, which is its home, which is fiery, feisty. That might be a challenging placement for some. So just be aware. Be aware if you're feeling feisty. That's all I have for you this week, my love. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it so much. I'll talk to you next time. Bye. Now, before you go, let me keep your ear for just a moment. This week's episode is brought to you by www.theselfcarewitch.com, my bread and butter, where you can find more information on my current courses, offerings, and other fun ways to connect with myself and yourself. If you enjoyed this episode and you dig what I'm doing here, please subscribe to the podcast, rate it, and leave a review. It helps so much. And if you'd like to connect with me, head to theselfcarewitch.com. I'd truly love to hear from you. Until next time, take care.